Consider for a moment how many hours of your waking life quietly disappear into worry over things that will never come to pass, things entirely outside your power to change, things that, when you truly examine them, carry no real weight at all. Sit with that question before you rush to answer it. Let it settle in you slowly. If you have crossed into your 60s or beyond, you have already witnessed thousands of mornings break open into light. You have carried grief and celebration alike, lived through days that meant nothing and days that meant everything, days whose full weight only you could ever understand. Inside you lives an entire lifetime, complete and lived. And yet, so many people at this stage of life find themselves staring at the ceiling in the small hours of the night, not because anything is actually wrong, but because the mind, out of long habit, keeps reaching toward worry the way a hand instinctively searches for something solid to hold onto in the dark. What follows are 6 of these hollow worries. They are not offered as a judgment against you, because the mind has always behaved this way in everyone, across every age. They are offered instead as a gentle act of illumination, so that once you see them plainly for what they truly are, empty vessels that quietly drain away your most precious hours, their hold over you may begin to soften. You still have time ahead of you, likely more than you assume, and that time deserves to be guarded and honored. There is a word from the Buddhist tradition, papañca, that resists any single clean translation, but points to something like the mind's tendency to spread and multiply. It takes the smallest kernel of unease and stretches it outward, adding imagined dialogues, invented dangers, and thorny branches until a person finds themselves wandering through an entire imagined world built from nothing more than one small fear. Every mind does this to some degree, but through years of sitting with people and listening closely, it becomes clear that this tendency often deepens rather than fades with age. Why should that be? Because growing older often means gradually losing certain kinds of control. The body no longer answers commands the way it once did. The pace of the world outside quickens. Old roles fall away. Work ends. Children grow independent. And identity shifts beneath your feet. When people feel that grip on their circumstances loosening, the mind frequently substitutes worry in its place, as though the act of worrying were itself a form of doing something, a way of feeling prepared rather than powerless. But this feeling is an illusion, and a costly one at that. There is a story told of an old monastic teacher in Sri Lanka, well into his 80 years, who once turned to a young student and asked what he was doing with his hands. The student looked down and noticed, almost with surprise, that his fists had been clenched tightly in his lap for a long while without his awareness. "I am holding something," he said. The teacher asked him what exactly he was holding. When the student opened his hands, they were completely empty. He had spent a great deal of time gripping nothing at all, and his shoulders now ached from the effort of it. This is precisely what hollow worry does to us. It drains our vitality, our attention, our capacity for joy, all in exchange for something that was never actually present to begin with. With that in mind, let us walk through these 6 worries, one at a time, with patience and without any harsh self-judgment. The first hollow worry is the concern over what others think of you. Many people quietly carry, deep into their later years, the burden of an audience that exists only in their imagination. Perhaps a comment made at a family dinner months ago still replays in your mind 50 times over as you wonder how it was received. Perhaps a friend never returned your call, and your mind has since built elaborate explanations for what that silence must mean. Perhaps you made a choice about where you would live, how you would spend your savings, how you would fill your days, and some part of you is still bracing for disapproval that has not come. This is among the most common and most exhausting forms of empty worry, because the audience you imagine judging you exists almost entirely within your own head. There is a teaching, paraphrased here, suggesting that whoever praises you has not truly understood the whole of you, and whoever criticizes you may not necessarily be mistaken, but neither of them is you. The opinions others hold, even those closest to your heart, come from their own private histories, fears, and unmet needs. They are not an accurate reflection of your worth. It is worth remembering, too, that most people are simply too consumed with their own inner lives to be thinking about you nearly as much as you fear they are. A useful question to ask whenever the thought, "What must they think of me?" arises, is whether this moment will still matter 5 years from now. Very often, honestly, the answer is no. Occasionally, the answer is yes, and in those cases, the worry deserves genuine attention and real conversation. But the imagined criticism, the rehearsed apology delivered to someone who is not even present, these are energy spent on nothing. You have lived long enough by now to know exactly who you are, and that knowledge is worth more than any approval, real or invented. The second hollow worry concerns money that lies beyond your control. It should be said clearly from the start that there is nothing wrong with thoughtful financial planning, careful budgeting, and wise decision making. These are genuine acts of wisdom. What is being spoken of here is something different, the worry that lingers after all reasonable planning has already been done, or the anxiety that arrives uninvited in the middle of the night, immune to logic, unmoved by any spreadsheet, unsolvable by any further action. A retired teacher from the American Midwest, 72 years old, healthy, comfortably provided for, once told a simple story of her own life. She said she had spent 20 years saving for a catastrophe that never arrived, and in the process she had missed 20 years of actually living. She did not say this bitterly, but with a kind of quiet awakening, as though only recently understanding the bargain she had unknowingly made. The worry itself, she realized, had cost her more than any real emergency ever would have. Buddhist teaching offers a concept sometimes rendered as non-attachment, though the image of an open hand captures it more gently. It does not mean discarding what you have or denying that you have needs. It simply means loosening a grip that has been held so long you forgot it was even there. When the hand opens, nothing inside it is lost. It is simply held more lightly, and in that lightness, you can finally feel warmth reach your palm. Whatever financial steps remain within your power, take them. Then release the rest, not out of defeat, but out of genuine wisdom. The third hollow worry is constant preoccupation with your physical health. This particular worry is tricky because it wears the mask of responsibility. Of course, attention to your body matters. Of course, symptoms deserve notice, doctors deserve visits, and good choices deserve to be made. All of that is sound and wise. But there exists a line easily crossed without noticing between caring for the body and being ruled by fear of it. When every sensation is catalogued, every small fluctuation tracked, every ache inventoried before the day has even properly begun, that is no longer care. It has quietly become a form of self-harm. The chronic anxiety this produces, elevated stress hormones, tension held in the muscles, disrupted sleep, causes real physical damage in its own right. In this way, the very worry about health becomes a source of poor health. There is a teaching, offered here in spirit rather than exact translation, describing the body as something like a guest house, worthy of good care but never to be mistaken for your true home. You are not your body. You are the one who resides within it, and holding that distinction lightly can offer tremendous freedom. One of the simplest and most healing practices available is walking meditation, not vigorous exercise, not tracking your pulse, but simply walking slowly, feeling your feet meet the ground, breathing, staying present to the remarkable fact that you exist, that you are moving, that you are alive. This is not inspection of the body, but true inhabitation of it, and the difference between the two is profound. The fourth hollow worry, and perhaps the heaviest of the six, is grief over a past that cannot be altered. It is also among the most universally human. Every person carries actions they regret, words left unspoken, moments when they fell short of the person they hoped to be, less patient, less courageous, less loving than they wished. We have caused pain to others, missed opportunities, made choices we now look back on with sorrow. In small measure, regret can serve as a teacher, revealing what we value and pointing us toward who we still hope to become. But when regret turns into endless rumination, replaying the same scene over and over, inventing different outcomes, reliving the original wound freshly each time, it stops teaching anything at all and becomes instead a practiced habit of suffering. The teaching of impermanence, usually applied to the future, applies equally and with quiet liberation to the past. The person who made that mistake, spoke those words, took that action, arose from a particular combination of circumstances, a certain depth of understanding at the time, a certain amount of pain, a certain state of heart and mind. That exact combination no longer exists. It has already dissolved. You are not that same person any longer. You are not entirely separate from them either. But you have not remained frozen in that moment. You have continued moving forward, and that continued movement matters. None of this means the harm caused was not real, nor that forgiveness comes easily, nor that accountability becomes unnecessary. But it does mean that endlessly punishing yourself for who you once were is not the same thing as honesty. It is instead a form of cruelty turned inward. A small practice worth trying is this. Write down one thing you are still carrying, one specific regret, a name, a single moment. Hold the page in your hands. Breathe. As you exhale, say quietly without performance that you cannot return to the past, but you are still here and you are still making choices. Then set the page down. You cannot rewrite what happened, but you remain the author of the story. You continue to tell yourself about it, and that story is still capable of change. The fifth hollow worry is anxiety over a future that may never actually arrive. Many are surprised to learn that most worry about the future is, in essence, pure fabrication. Research into how the mind works suggests that the overwhelming majority of imagined disasters, rehearsed confrontations, and anticipated worst-case outcomes simply never happen. Even when difficulty does eventually come, it rarely resembles the shape the mind had constructed for it in advance. The mind tells remarkable stories, but as a predictor of what is actually coming, it proves an unreliable narrator. The teaching of non-self offers something useful here. The anxious, planning, catastrophizing self that does all this worrying is not a fixed or permanent entity, but rather an ongoing process, a stream of passing moments. And here lies a quiet truth. The self who will actually be present when the future arrives will not be quite the same self who is worrying about it now. You carry inner resources not yet visible to you, wisdom that will surface exactly when it is needed. You have faced difficulty before and remain here regardless. Whatever the future holds will be met by a version of you who has continued to grow and adapt, who will respond to what is genuinely happening rather than to the elaborate scenario constructed in the mind at 2 in the morning. The practice of calm abiding meditation is sometimes described as training the mind to return home, not by forcing thought to cease or suppressing worry outright, but through the gentle repeated act of bringing attention back to the breath, to this single inhale, this single exhale, to this moment which alone is real. Stop sending your mind ahead as a scout into unfamiliar territory it has never actually visited. Let it rest instead where you truly are. The sixth and final hollow worry, saved for last because it may be the most deceptive of all, is the belief that it is simply too late. The other 5 worries cause pain, but this one carries a unique cruelty because it disguises itself as plain realism. It insists that it isn't pessimism, only honesty, that you are simply too old now, that the moment for change has passed, that there is no point in beginning anything new. It sounds like wisdom, like calm acceptance of the facts. But it is not wisdom at all. It is fear wearing the costume of reason. Among the ancient teaching stories is that of a woman named Ambapal, celebrated in her time for her beauty and her sharp mind. By every conventional measure, by the time she came to the Buddha in her later years, her finest days were considered long behind her. Yet she was received and she was taught, And the texts record that in her later life she reached a profound liberation, composing verses of great beauty on impermanence and the freedom she had found. Tradition remembers her not as a warning about growing old, but as a teacher in her own right. There have been students who began meditation practice for the very first time at 65, at 70, at 78, and without exception, every one of them later described it, sometimes through tears, sometimes with a disbelieving laugh, as among the finest decisions of their entire life. Not because they became someone new, but because they finally became more completely themselves. The present moment asks nothing of your history. It does not check your age. It does not require decades of practice, a flawless past, or a fully resolved life. It asks only one question: are you here? And as long as breath continues to move through you, the answer remains yes. It is not too late. It was never too late. That particular story is one you are free to set down whenever you are ready. Having walked together through these 6 hollow worries, the opinions of others, money beyond your reach, a body watched too anxiously, a past already gone, a future not yet arrived and perhaps never to arrive, and the false belief that time has run out, know that none of them are meant to be defeated through sheer willpower, because that is not how the mind functions, and it is not what this teaching asks of you. What is asked instead is something both simpler and, in its own way, more demanding. To see these worries clearly when they arise, to recognize them the instant they appear, and to say quietly, without any drama, that you know them, that they have returned again, and that you see them now. Recognition alone begins to change your relationship to them. From there, 3 small movements are offered, not as rigid rules, but as gentle invitations. The first is to pause, allowing 3 breaths to pass whenever the familiar grip of worry tightens in your chest and the mind begins its familiar spiral, needing nothing solved in those 3 breaths, only your arrival within them. The second is to name what has appeared, giving the worry its number. This is the second worry, concerning money, or the fourth, concerning the past, because naming a thing creates a small distance from it, turning you into the one who watches it rather than the one who is consumed by it, and from that distance, choice becomes possible. The third is to return, asking simply what is actually present right now, not in imagination, not in memory, not in some feared tomorrow, but here, in this room, in this body, in this very breath. Most often, what you find there is quiet, manageable, and, in its own modest way, enough. Consider, finally, an image worth carrying with you. In many places, people speak of morning light as the most beautiful, the freshness of dawn, dew still resting on the leaves, everything appearing new and full of possibility. But those who have lived long enough to witness many sunsets know something the young have not yet learned, that the light of late afternoon holds its own particular beauty. Longer shadows, a warmer gold, a softness that the brightness of noon can never offer. Your life at this stage is not something diminished. It is simply a different quality of light, and there remains extraordinary beauty to be found in it if your gaze is not fixed only on the shadows. May whatever days remain to you be spent not in worry, but in wonder. May you be well. May you be at peace. May you be free. Before parting, consider this. Which of these 6 hollow worries spoke most directly to you, and which one have you been quietly carrying the longest? There is no need for an immediate answer, only a willingness to look honestly. If these words reached something true in you today, consider passing them along to someone who might need to hear them too. And if you found something worthwhile here, let it stay with you, so that whenever these words are needed again, they can find their way back to you. Walk gently from here, breathe deeply, and remember that the present moment is always waiting, patiently, exactly where it has been all along.